Here's a quote from CSL. It says, "The ability to be vulnerable and authentic is often seen through the lens of privilege. There are many within our world for whom showing up authentically is unsafe. This is the work that is the call to action. Understanding that fear, uncertainty, and even comparison are not things to be avoided, ignored, or suppressed. Instead, their presence becomes a beacon, a microscope into which to view our lives, our communities, and our world. It is in this close-up view that we can begin the work of removing the barriers to vulnerability and a life truly lived out loud." As we go into meditation, I invite you to consider this idea. I can make friends with uncertainty, knowing that it is a part of the wholeness of life. As you bring your attention gently to my voice, know that you rest in God, that there is nothing but God. There is no place where God is not. It is all-inclusive. It is whole, complete, and perfect. It is ever expanding. It is infinite. It is eternal. It is all-powerful, all-knowing, everywhere present, available in its entirety at every point, simultaneously. So there is nothing, no thing, no thought, nothing outside of God. In infinite expressions, but yet all one whole divine perfection with freedom and love and joy and all good. It can be nothing but good. And we are all part of it. It is in us. We are in it. At every cell, in every atom, every star or planet. We are indivisible from this wholeness, undivided in truth. And so in this oneness, in this consciousness of oneness, I know for each of us that our vulnerability is our strength. Because in truth, we are invulnerable in this knowledge and this wisdom of our eternality. And so I know that we all come here in perfect divine right order to support and to express, as Reverend Jerry is one of the vehicles of the divine, as each of us are, and our musicians, and our technicians, and our community, and everything. It's all the expression of love. And I speak these words into the law, knowing that they're already true. And I say, thank you, God. And so it is. Where's Lesley? Let's introduce Lesley Alexander. Thank you.
Lucille Park.
And Lucille Park.
Oh,
Glad to be
I'm
here.
sorry.
Happy Easter, everybody. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for the springing, fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew pass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden so plain. Praise with elation, praise for the morning, God's recreation of the new day. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for the spring, fresh from the word.
My dears, thank you so much. So, good morning again to those of you in the sanctuary this morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those of you on the internet, or if you're listening later, welcome. We welcome all of you and wish you a very happy Easter and a glorious day. So, my topic for this morning is rolling the stone away. And I honor and celebrate us who are here on Easter again. If you've been in this teaching for just a little while, I'm so pleased you're here and I welcome you and I'm so glad that you found this teaching. For those of us who have been here longer and maybe years and maybe decades and maybe centuries, perhaps as we were getting ready this morning, our ego, and remember Wayne Dyer said ego stands for edging God out. Our ego said, it's a really nice day. Let's take the dog to the park. Or let's go to the beach. Let's celebrate Easter with a mimosa at El Torito or whatever. And how wonderful that we said, yes, I'd be happy to do that later, but it's important that I go be reminded of the truth of my being. So I honor us for allowing ourselves to hear this again, because every time we do, every time we come on Sunday, every time we read another book, we are different than we were before. I've had several experiences. I think it was a Joel Goldsmith book that we did in class years and years ago, and I'm like, I'm just not getting this. This is just not resonating for me. And so put it down on the bookshelf, and a few years later, the still small voice said, go pick up that book. And I did. And oh my goodness, absolutely amazing. It might have been Leave Your Nets. I'm not sure which book it was, but just an amazing Joel Goldsmith book. But because I'm different than I was, ideally, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, yesterday, because you're different than you were in those periods of time or yesterday, because we're always growing. We're always learning. We're always maturing in our spiritual life. So thank you so much for being with me today, and I honor you for taking the time. So we've heard this before, and we know that, oh, got it, thanks, and then I'm going to attend once and then go off into the world and then wonder why it's not changing. And we know that it's not a one-time thing. It's the pattern. It's the pattern of thought. And so we come back week after week. We go to the book, and then the next book, or the class, and then the next class, and keep being reminded of the truth of our being. So that's what we're about. We look at the areas of our lives and see this is working really well. And it might be your health, it might be your relationships, it might be your money, whatever it is. And then there are those areas that aren't moving quite yet, or moving as quickly as we wanted them to. And we can ask, what must I change about myself in order to receive this? What do I still believe about this part of life that I'm ready to lovingly release and move forward in? This thing called life is the most amazing experience. I bet you would agree with me on that. And this whole thing, the relationships and the money and the lessons that we learn and all of those things. And it's a process, not an event. This thing called life, because we're always learning, we're always growing. Ideally, we're always asking, what do I believe about this, and does it still serve me? When we do our spiritual mind treatment, our affirmative prayer, very often, whatever it is, after we say, and so it is, whatever it is manifests or shows up in our lives right then. The parking place, the unexpected income, the answer to whatever it is we need to know. Sometimes it takes longer. And it's not because we're talking God into doing anything. It's because we're talking ourselves into whatever it is. So I accept that greater good, and so it is. And the universe goes to create that for us, but we're not always ready to receive it because we have a belief that that's too good for us, and so it sometimes takes a little longer. We humans in 2023 are not always really patient. My husband absolutely loved Joan Rivers, and he memorized a lot of. Do you remember? Yes. Yeah. Oh my God. He memorized a lot of her work, both pulpit worthy and not pulpit worthy comments. But one of the comments that she made was about standing in front of the microwave and yelling, "Hurry!" 60 seconds, and I need it quicker than that. In 2023, I sent the email. I sent the text. How come I blinked my eyes once and it's not there yet? I'm changing cell phone provider. I'm changing data providers because it's too slow. We aren't always as patient as we could be. So today we are remembering the events that led up to Easter, as well as Easter Sunday itself. And you remember the story when the women went to the tomb to roll the stone away and found that it had already been rolled away and that Jesus was no longer there. Within that tomb was newness. Think of our perception of the word tomb and death and darkness and all the rest of that. But in this case, it was newness and possibility and new life. And so that was the experience, obviously, on Easter. But until Easter Sunday, there was that stone, and it might not have been a Sunday. It doesn't matter what day of the week it was. But there was that stone blocking this newness, blocking this greater good, blocking this new possibility. So my question for us this morning is, what is the stone in our lives that's blocking our newness and our greater good? So we're going to talk about that this morning, starting with our beliefs about God and life. Now, if you've heard me speak more than a couple of times, you might remember that I love to ask us, what do we really believe about God? Spirit, the universe, the infinite, the divine, whatever we choose to call it. We know, we in New Thought recognize it as a loving presence that always responds to us as we believe. But if we come from traditional Christianity, there may be that old residue, for lack of a better word, those old beliefs that God is still that white, straight, cranky old man up on a cloud someplace that's ready to turn us into a pillar of salt at any moment. No, that's not what I believe anymore. No, that is not. I've gotten past that. Are you sure? And so there's no judgment here. It's just a matter of, so when we do our affirmative prayer, our spiritual mind treatment, and say, this is what I want, and it's not only is it outside of the box, it's in a different time zone from the box. Would the universe do that? Would the universe say yes and provide that? Of course. But what do we believe about it? Do we believe it's possible, or do we still believe in limitations and that we don't necessarily deserve it? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So what do we believe about our higher power and about life in general? Is it ridiculously amazing and totally for us that always responds to us, and this life in San Diego in April where we didn't need the umbrella or the snow shovel this morning? Do we recognize how awesome life is? And even if you did need the snow shovel and the umbrella, how awesome life is? Do we recognize that? Our teaching invites, encourages, and even challenges us to go back and look again. What do I believe about this? And if it's not manifesting for me, if it's not showing up in my life as I have after I've done my work, again, what do I need to change about myself? What do I believe about this that will allow me to receive whatever it is? So our beliefs about God and life and our story. So something happened with your work or your relationship or your refrigerator or your dishwasher. I thought I had a situation with the dishwasher yesterday, and so we had words. They were okay words. They were pulpit worthy, but we had words, and I don't know what happened, but then it did what it was supposed to do, and I held it in the light and knew perfect health and all the rest of those things, and it did what it was supposed to do. But what is our story about what happened? And how much time do we spend talking about it and making it even more dramatic? Because as human beings, we sit around the campfire, either literally or imagined, and share our stories, and we get a little more, using a purely psychological term, we get a little more sympathy and, oh my goodness, and oh, I'm so sorry that happened for you, if we just embellish just a little. But the problem is that as our mouths are running, our ears are hearing. So what do we tell? And are we still stuck on the ain't it awful story? Or are we recognizing down the road that there's a different way to look at that and come back out of the victimization just a little? Our grief can keep us stuck and not allowing ourselves to feel our grief. As many of you know, this is big for me, and I love to talk about what we don't talk about. And one of the things we don't talk about is allowing ourselves to feel the grief and the loss, whether it was something that happened yesterday or last week or 50 years ago. Allow ourselves to feel that so that we can move past it and move forward. I can't live a genuine, wholehearted life if I'm not using my whole heart. And included in my heart is the love and the joy and the compassion and the grief and all of those human emotions. This month we're talking about, last month we talked about authenticity. This month we're talking about vulnerability. And in being vulnerable, this is who I am. I'm charming and sparkling and wonderful and mature and practical and all of those other things. I'm also, don't tell anybody, I'm also hateful and surly and cranky and impatient and impractical and all of those other things. And don't tell anybody, but so are you. Because that's who we are. That's the truth of our being. That's who we are. And if we don't allow ourselves to be that, now it doesn't mean we have to walk down the street all day being hateful and surly and cranky, but we recognize that. Why am I in a mood? Do you ever wake up in the morning and just, even before there was coffee, even before your feet hit the floor, you're just cranky? It's okay. We don't have to be charming and sparkling all the time. There are those terms related to our human emotions, toxic positivity and spiritual bypass, that I can't, no, it's all good, everything's in divine order, everything is wonderful, and it is, and it is, and it is. But we also have to allow ourselves to feel that grief, to feel that loss, to feel that whatever it is, so that we can keep moving forward. Life is just the funniest thing. And my boyfriend is on his way, and he's either on his way or very soon he will be on his way to Iceland. And I am complaining bitterly to anyone who is listening because he's going to Iceland and I'm standing here. But what happens is he's a nurse at Scripps, and they go, small group of nurses go once a year someplace. Just the nurses, no partners, no spouses, no children, just the nurses, and go and have a wonderful time. Last year they went to Hawaii, and this year they're going to Iceland. And I'm like, oh, great. I know where my passport is. I'll go and buy heavier clothes. And he's like, well, that's nice, but you're not going. I know. Oh, my God. See? So here's a little story. This is the last time I'm going to tell this because I am just a little jealous, but really excited. But so what do they have in Iceland? They have puffins. So bear with me when I tell this story. It's just the goofiest thing. So back when I was 8 or 9 years old, they actually had printed books. And before there was the internet and before there was, I know, right? Before there was Wikipedia and all those, and Google and all those other things, there was the World Book Encyclopedia and there was Childcraft. Do you remember? Do you remember Childcraft? Childcraft was the children's version of the encyclopedia and had wonderful poems and wonderful stories. And one of the stories was about a puffin. There once was a puffin just the shape of a muffin, and he lived on an island in the bright blue sea. And he ate little fishes that were most delicious, and he had them for breakfast, and he had them for tea. And so the story goes on, and he has nobody to play with because he's eating the fishes, and one of the fishes goes to him and says, you know, if you stop eating us, we can play. And so that's how the story ends, and the puffin eats pancakes, like you and like me. So it's an amazing, wonderful story. And so I'm out with the dog, and I'm just minding my own business, and I'm thinking about puffins. And I'm thinking about childcraft, and I'm thinking about reading this story to my sister when I was 9 or 10, and she was 3 or 4, and I just start sobbing. Oh, Jerry, you finally crossed that thin dividing line. What is going on here? Why are you getting so emotional about this? Because I'm grieving for those days that were so wonderful. Do I want to be back 10 years old? No. Am I grieving still because my parents are gone and things are different? No. But how important it is for us to allow ourselves to feel whatever that is and look at it and recognize it so that we can move forward. Allow ourselves to feel that grief. Because life changes, absolutely does. We know that. And it's okay. We can allow ourselves to feel that. Oh. Thank you so much. Puffins. So Oliver's not going to bring me back a live one. I tried, but he will perhaps send me a picture. I'm just so excited for him. So, all right. So we're talking about the stone and what's blocking us from experiencing this amazing new life that is there for us. Our beliefs about God and life, our story, our grief, and the need for forgiveness. I do a workshop on forgiveness, and there's a quote that I have and I apologize I couldn't find it, but it basically said that every time you remember that traumatic experience, your body, it's like your body and your mind doesn't distinguish when it happened in that moment versus present day. And so your physical body and your mind and your cells go through the trauma of that list of remembering that experience again. So forgive and forget is vastly overrated because I don't know that we can, but in the forgiveness process, releasing the energy and the heat and the judgment, we lessen that experience of trauma and allow ourselves to move forward. Included in that trauma and that need for forgiveness might be a Judas experience. Now, remember on Friday was Good Friday. We celebrated Good Friday. Many of us did. And you remember the story that the disciples and Jesus and Judas were in the garden. And Judas kissed Jesus on the cheek and to let the soldiers know that that's who that was. And the soldiers came and got him and carted him off. He betrayed Jesus. Judas is probably the most hated character in the Bible. Have you ever met anybody named Judas? No. So all these years and centuries and decades hated because he betrayed Jesus, and if he hadn't have done that, then the soldiers wouldn't have found Jesus, and Jesus wouldn't have been crucified, and so on and so on. And yet, if he didn't do exactly what he did, then the prophecies would not have been fulfilled. Jesus would not have been, the soldiers would not have found Jesus. He wouldn't have been taken to Caiaphas and then wound up being crucified and rising again on the third day. So Judas had to do what he did so that the story would play out. My question for us is, in our lives, as we look back and see maybe those experiences that we judged as betrayal, as heartbreaking, as heart-wrenching, are there any of those that had to happen so this could happen? It's an interesting question, because resentment and the feeling of betrayal, those are terrible, terrible emotions. But is there a way to look at that and again change the story? Interesting question. So just to review, our beliefs about God and life, our story, our grief, our need for forgiveness, our beliefs about those people, relationships, and money. What do we believe? So we come to church on Sunday and everything's wonderful and we're lavishly abundant and God is our source and so on, and that's just delightful. And then we go home and worry because how are we going to pay the rent? We don't talk, that's one of those things we don't like to talk about. And I just so invite us to recognize that an abundant life includes abundance in every single area. So our relationships and our health and our money and our day-to-day life. And if it's not, there's the opportunity to look at what we believe about it and maybe change it. Because you might have, and remember Edwin Gaines' book, The Four Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, she talks about all four of these areas. And we might have perfect health and all the money in the world, and we want to go someplace with our friends, but if our relationships are a wreck, nobody wants to go with us. So it's all of those things contribute to this perfect abundant life. So the relationship and the physical health and the money and all the rest of that. So what do we believe about that? And then is it okay for me to be who I am? Is it okay for me to speak my truth? Is it okay for me to come out? And of course, in the gay and lesbian community, that's the term we use when we tell the world that that's the truth of our being. But there's way more for all of us. There is that coming out opportunity for us to say, yes, I want to do this. And equally, and maybe even more importantly, no, I don't want to do that. Ever done that done something out of obligation? Just, oh my goodness. And it's so painful because you regret saying, or at least I, regret saying yes, and then we resent the person that even asked us in the first place. How dare you ask me to do that? You knew I was going to say yes. And so it's their fault, right? It's not my fault. It's their fault. We'll go with that. Can we speak our truth? Can we say yes? Can we say no? Can we say, no, thank you, I have the rest of the day free, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go frolic. Brene Brown writes, we have to become intentional. Oh, hold on. We have to become intentional about cultivating sleep and play, and about letting go of exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as self-worth. Can we just be? Is it okay to just be, to not be producing something or accomplishing something? Can we just take that day? Growing up, my parents were amazing and beyond, and we had a policy about mental health days. And on a school day, I'm not sick. I'm just sick and tired. Ever been? I'm not physically ill. I just really don't want to do this. And so we got every once in a while, and we didn't abuse the privilege, but we got to take a mental health day. Is that okay? Can we do that as mature, responsible adults? We can. We can, but we have to give ourselves permission to do that. Our beliefs about deservedness. If you were with us 2 weeks ago, and if you weren't, I so invite you to go on YouTube and listen, because our beloved Reverend Natasha talked about guilt and shame and deservedness. That we did something last week, 40 years ago, that nobody else remembers. God doesn't remember, but we do. And we still hold that against ourselves, and that's why I'm not financially abundant. That's why I'm not finding the new job. That's why I'm not getting the new relationship, because of that I did in 4th grade. Sounds silly. And yet, what do we really believe? What do we carry with us? It was such a great talk. Thank you again for that, by the way. Fear can be a big piece of our stone. 2 Fridays ago, quick story, I have a situation with the IRS. Okay, back that up. So you go to the mailbox and open the mailbox, and what return address strikes fear in your heart more than anything? Internal Revenue Service Center, Fresno, California, 93888. I do. We have a close personal relationship. No, I just have a thing with numbers. I really not that close with them. What is scarier than having a situation with the IRS? And so my situation is just that I made a payment that they didn't credit. And I called, and this was as of April of last year, so I called the day before Christmas and sat on hold and listened to music and did that and explained the situation, and the person was going to take care of it, and it was never taken care of. So, do I call again? No. And this is completely out of character for me. I called and made an appointment and drove to Santa Ana and went into the office. I am in the IRS office. Dang, right? Yep. I got a Starbucks black coffee with a shot of espresso just to make sure that I was ready to do this. This is scary. But you know what? The woman that I spoke with could not have been more gracious. She does what she does during the day and then goes home to her family. No claws, no fur, no, evil, satanic anything there. Wow. So if I can go and see the IRS in person and get this worked out, what else can I do? I mean, I can scale tall buildings in a single bound, right? Yes. What do we fear? That when we look at when we allow ourselves to look in the face, we find, maybe that wasn't so scary. So the IRS was not scary at all. The scary part was the southbound Interstate 5 on a Friday afternoon, but that's a separate story. What are we afraid of? Speaking our truth, standing up for ourselves. What are we afraid of? And can we say, I don't know? do something different, do something we've never done before, and see what happens. As you may know, one of my favorite sitcoms is Golden Girls, and there's a quote from episode 3 in series 1. Rose is going out on her first date after her husband died like 10 years before. And Dorothy is talking with Rose, and Rose isn't going to go because she's too afraid. And Dorothy says, the bottom line is, if you take a chance in life, sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad things happen, but honey, if you don't take a chance, nothing happens. Wow. There is amazing wisdom there. So can we say, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I know how it's going to come out at the very end, but can we say, I really want to do this, and I know somehow, some way, I'm going to go out on a limb, and God's going to grow that tree that supports the tree. Remember, that's Edwin Gaines. Yes, thank you. So my question for us and for you and for me is, what are the stones? What are the stones that are blocking the good, the amazing life, the abundance, the greatest life? What are the stones that are blocking that good from coming to us? And is there a way for us to roll that stone away? And the truth is, in our spiritual practice and in our meditation and being aware of what we believe and what still works for us and what doesn't, we can begin to make that stone a little smaller. And a little smaller, and a little smaller. And then, before we know it, we can roll the stone away and just step right over it. And so this morning, before you leave, I invite you to come up and pick up your new stone. Because as we roll the big one away, there's a little one, and we'll always have that little one, because it's oh, I didn't know I still believed that. Or, oh, I didn't know that was still part of my life. But that's no thing. I can just move it off to the side. I can just release it. I can just go past it. So I invite you to take a stone home with you and recognize that that's the size we're going for. And allow yourself to, might not be this afternoon, might not be tomorrow morning, but lovingly allow yourself to do your spiritual practice and release some of these things that we talked about. You have a process, a piece of paper on your chair with the process of looking at, and we won't spend the time this morning, but I invite you to take that home, and your homework can be just look at what's behind the stone. What's the greatest life for you? The financial abundance, the perfect health, the new relationships, the good night's sleep at night, whatever it is. And then what's holding you back? What's keeping you from that? And begin to be aware of that and begin to work on the stone, because it gets a little smaller and it gets a little smaller, and then all of a sudden it's gone. So I want to close with, I love Facebook. I just love Facebook. And this came up on my feed a couple of days ago, and I just love this. Now is where love breathes. Because everything we've talked about this morning happened 20 minutes ago, or last week, or 40 years ago. But now, in this moment, is all the love that we'll ever experience. It's where our power is. It's where our possibility is. So with that in mind, join me in the light for just a minute. So in the peace and the quiet of this moment, we allow ourselves to be reminded of our oneness with the God presence, with one another, and with all of life. And we give great thanks for this glorious Easter morning, for the opportunity to be reminded of the truth of our being, to allow ourselves to move forward in gently but firmly and lovingly, beginning to release the stone. Release the stone that's blocking our opportunity to live our greatest life. Release the stone of shame and guilt and need for forgiveness and belief in lack and struggle and all of those things unlike love. And as we move forward, we stay anchored in this present moment, because life is just a series of this present moments. This is where our power is, right here, right now. So we give thanks for our beloved spiritual community, for this glorious day, for the opportunity to be together. And together we say, and so it is. Thanks, everybody.